Hey guys, welcome back to Community Starcraft 2. I'm your host Magnet, and today's lesson is going to be regarding Protoss mechanics. We're going to be going over a lot of the physical things that you're going to use to play the game, namely trying to set good habits that are going to help you out for the rest of your playing days in Starcraft 2. So we're going to be focusing a lot on efficiently using hotkeys and different little tricks and nuances that are going to help you play the game faster, so that when you get to the next videos and you see me playing live or you see other people playing live, it's not completely overwhelming just to see all this stuff happening all at once. And I have no idea who's watching my stream right now, but there are a few viewers, so if you're watching this being broadcast live, hello. I do broadcast these live so that I can just easily transfer the VOD over to YouTube. So anyway, so we're going to be getting into this here in just a second. And just to introduce everything that's going on, like I said before, this is just going to be a lot about hotkeys and control, so we'll just jump into the game. I don't really have anything else left to say before that, so I don't know why I'm talking. But, so yeah, we're here in the main screen. We're just going to go into a custom game today, and it doesn't really matter who we're going to be fighting because we're not going to be trying to beat them. We're just going to be trying to get good habits built and show you guys different tricks that you can use to help you improve your play. So we'll go ahead and set this to very easy. We'll play against a Terran. This all doesn't really matter that much, since they'll just sit in their base anyway. And the whole idea here is that, I mean, we're just going to be showing concepts, so I don't even really need an opponent, but what are you going to do? So the game is loading up here, and again, this is really just a precursor to the next video that's going to follow, which is the macro video, which I've actually already done, but I realize it's really just too intense for new players to grasp until they have a video to bridge. So that's what this is all about. So what I did to start off the game here is I did just go ahead and produce a worker. When I did that by just hitting Q on my keyboard, as you can see it hotkeyed there. And I also just set my nexus to the control group 1, which you can do by selecting whatever you want, hitting control, and hitting a number from 1 to 0. So if I want to set my nexus to 4, I can do that. I can set it to 5, 6, whatever. You can set any of your units to whatever control group you want, and you want to hotkey units that are useful so that you can get back to them whenever you need to. Notice that I'm not going to be touching any of these buttons down here throughout the life of this video, because touching any buttons down here is a lot slower than just using your keyboard, and you can see the keys that are displayed on here that you need to be using in order to get this done as soon as possible. So once, like if I notice that a probe is done here, which I can even see if I'm not looking at my nexus, you can see the progress right there. I need to put another probe in queue, so I can just go ahead and hit that button in order to do it. Another key, or rather something to remember with these control groups, is that you can center your vision back on any of these things that you have selected by double tapping the control group that it's selected to. So if I wanted to center my vision on these probes, I could just double tap 4, that'll get me back to what I'm looking at, or I can just double tap 1 to get on the nexus. Whatever you have hotkeyed, if you double tap on there, it'll center your vision back on there just in case you need to look back at it for whatever reason. So let me go ahead and make a pylon here. I'll make a gas. I'll just do a whole bunch of different things so that you can see how effortlessly I can do things if I'm not going down here and touching all these. You typically want to keep your mouse in the center of the screen and try to reserve its movements only to move the screen around a little bit, but even if you can minimize that by having different hotkeys set up in order to get around different visions that you need to be looking at. Different visions, that doesn't really make sense, but I think you know what I mean. Yeah, I'm totally just stumbling over myself. So I did just go ahead and create a gateway. We can hotkey that as well, and you want to hotkey as many things that are going to be important throughout the game. So right now I have my nexus hotkeyed, and I have my gateway hotkeyed. And you'll also notice that I did send all my workers back to work after they were done building whatever need to be built. So you want to make sure all your workers are working, and there's little tricks that you can do to assure that as well. If I have a unit out and I give it an order to walk over here, let's say I want to have it build something. Let's say I want to have it build a pylon. But if I don't do anything after that, this worker is just going to sit there and do nothing until I tell him to go back to work. So if you want to have him build a pylon and then go right back to what he's doing, you can hold shift and then you can queue up a whole bunch of different commands. So if I want to build a pylon, I'll hold shift and I'll right click on the mineral line, and it'll go back to the mineral line once he's doing that. Generally, when you're building buildings this Protoss, you really only want to pull one probe at a time, considering you can just stack his actions on top of each other and he can do a whole bunch of different things. So if I want this probe to build another gateway or a cybernetics core and a gas and a pylon and then go back to work, I can do that. So I'll just say gateway, then I'll say that's a forge, not a cybernetics core, but whatever. gas, I'll continue to hold shift to send him back to the mineral line. So you don't need to pull a whole bunch of different workers to get stuff done. You can just use one. And yeah, make good use of that shift command. Another thing shift can do is if you want to vary up the different things that you have selected on one hotkey, you can hold shift, and let's say I have a probe selected, you can select whatever you want while you're holding shift to add it to that current selection. So right now I have a whole bunch of different stuff added to that, and I can hotkey that or whatever I want. So I have that in my control group. Obviously you wouldn't want to hotkey pylons or anything weird like that, because it's not really going to do anything. They have no functionality. Maybe as vision if you want to warp in there, but we'll get to that in just a second. So one thing I did just do to my forge is you see this little thing spinning around it is chrono boost. That's a really important racial advantage that you're going to want to take advantage of. That sounds really redundant, but whatever. So, and you can see that while I'm producing units, or rather while I'm doing different things, all I'm doing is just selecting the control group that they're in. I have my gateways on 2 and on 1, and I can jump back and forth. But regarding chrono boost, that is something that's going to allow you to produce things faster. So right now I have an upgrade coming, and you can see the timer on there is a lot faster than the normal seconds as it is. That's the whole functionality of chrono boost, is that it allows you to build things or research things faster than you normally would be able to. So in the early game, most of the time you're just going to spend chrono boost on workers or on important units that you need to get out. Let's say I think I'm going to be attacked here in just a second and I need to chrono boost out a couple of units. I can do that, and again I just stack those commands by holding shift so that I wouldn't have to say, alright, chrono one and then chrono the other. So okay, cool. The other thing I want to make mention of is the control. Control is going to be the button that you're going to use in order to select a whole bunch of the same unit that's on the screen. So let's say instead of trying to select all these zealots, if they're all spread out like this, I don't want to be like, I need to select all of this. I can just hold control, and let me select something else. I can just hold control and it'll select all these zealots at once for me. So that's important if you have a whole bunch of different varied units in there. Like let's say we have a mixture of these kinds of things, and there's a whole bunch of probes in here as well. But I'm not going to be able to select just only the probes if I box them like this, but I can just hit control and select the probes by themselves and send them back to work. Let me just make sure I'm not screwing this up. Okay, cool, that looks good. Because I do get pretty far in some of these videos and realize that I'm just doing it wrong and I waste my time. So okay, cool. Yeah, so control and shift we have covered. We're going to talk about camera hotkeys now that might help out. We'll go ahead and take a couple of extra bases to demonstrate that functionality. There we go. And I have this on a shift Q so that he's going to go here and build that, go here and build that. You can see the lines denote what he's going to do. So again, make use of that shift button. It's really useful, especially as Protoss. And yeah, so he's going to be doing that, and we won't pay attention to him for just a second. We're going to get into the options here, which if you go down to hotkeys and you go to global and camera, you can see that there are some hotkeys that will change your center of vision that you can set to. So if I want to have it remember a place that I was looking at and I want to get back to that location quickly, it's a lot faster than going back. Let's say I'm looking out here and I want to look back at my main base. I don't want to have to scroll all the way down in order to look at my main base, and I don't want to have to click on the mini-map because I generally want my mouse in this center area as much as possible. What I can do is I can center my vision on whatever I want to look at. I can hold control and hit F5, and that's one save. I can go here and I can hit control F6. I can go here and hit control F7, and finally control and F8. That'll map F5 through F8 to be the screen saves that I just denoted there. So F5 is going to center me here. I'm hitting F6 to get here, F7 to get here, and F8 to get here. It's really useful if you need to jump around to different parts of the map. And you don't necessarily have to center your vision on... I'll go ahead and kill these Marines. You don't necessarily have to center your vision on your own bases, but that's what a lot of people like to do. But it's useful if you're like out on the map and you know that this base is being attacked, which is I think the third base that I said, I don't remember. But if I know this base needs to be attacked, I can just hit the button that'll get me right back there. It was actually F8. So yeah, if you get in a habit of that, like let's say there's, again, like you're just doing stuff over here, oh no, my main base is being attacked, instead of clicking down here on the map, you can just hit F5 and get right back to it. You can change those hotkeys to be whatever you want. Let me go ahead and build a cybernetics core so we can talk about another interesting Protoss mechanic that we need to definitely address. I'm going to scatter random pylons around the map as well. That will help us demonstrate the next little bit of this. So again, this probe is really the only one that I need to pull in order to do all these, and I do have him on a shift command. You can see he's going to go here and build that, He's going to go here and build this, so get used to doing that. The other couple things that I want to make mention of is that these little buttons down here, F1 and F2, are going to be to select workers that aren't actually doing anything. So you'll notice that this guy's not working, and that's kind of bad because his job is to work. And you really want all of your units doing their job as much as possible. So if he's not working, I can just be like, hey, F1, I'll grab an idle worker that needs to go back to work, and I can tell him to go back to work. If I have a whole bunch of different ones, you remember the control command selects a whole bunch of different things at once. Considering F1 grabs an idle worker, if I hit control in F1, it'll grab all of my idle workers. That way I can tell them all to go back to work at the same time. So you want to get used to stuff like that. The other one is F2, which is going to select all of your army units. I wouldn't recommend relying on this too much, but it can be useful sometimes. So if you hit F2, it's going to grab all my zealots for me. Ideally, you want to set your army to a hotkey that you're comfortable with, and sometimes you'll want to split them up into different hotkeys. We'll get to that in other videos, but for right now, just make sure you understand what F1 and F2 do. Okay, so let me start Warp Gate here, and I will Chrono Boost it, considering it's a very important upgrade. I'll add a whole bunch of gateways, again with my Shift Q, and we really only need one probe to pull, because pulling a whole bunch to do all these actions, it doesn't really make that big of a difference, and you want these guys working as much as possible. I can add stuff to my hotkey group once again if I have my first nexus selected. Hold Shift, select this, hold Shift, select this, hold Shift, select this, and remap them all to that hotkey. So now I can spread my production across all the different buildings that need to be producing. So you'll notice I have all 4 of my nexus set here. If I just rail on the Pro button, it'll split them up logically according to how fast all these are going to get out. So it'll put 2 in each instead of putting like 5 in one and then 3 in the next one. So you want to get used to all those things as well. Let me continue to Chrono Boost Warp Gate. And again, if we need to use control in order to select a whole bunch of different things, we just added new gateways. I can hold control and clicked on one of the gateways to select them all and update my control group here. Another interesting thing you can do with Protoss is they actually have their own hotkey for warp gates, which we will get to in just a second as soon as this finishes. I wish I would have started that earlier. So I'm kind of running out of things to talk about right now. I guess another thing you could make mention of is that you do want to hotkey other important things, like if I need this probe to see what's going on, I can set it to 3 so that I can get around the map, and I don't have to look at this probe in order to order them around. So I have that probe selected. I'll change the things really quickly so you can see that I have the right probe selected. And if I want to tell him to walk around based upon the minimap, I can just do that, and you can see his little dot moving. I can send him back over here, and he'll change directions, etc. So you don't have to be looking at the stuff that you're commanding in order to do, and that's a really good habit to get into. Like, if I know that this probe needs to be walking to some location for some reason, I don't have to look at him in order to do that. I can still be looking at my base, paying attention to whatever's over here, and click somewhere on the map, and he'll walk there. Okay, so what we just did is we transformed all of our gateways to Warp Gate, which you can do, and you definitely want to do in every Protoss game because it's a really important mechanic that they have. And when you have these untransformed gateways, as you can see right here, you'll see the difference between the two. Once Warp Gate is done, which you can research from the Cybernetics Core, you want to transform them all to Warp Gates, and you want to have a button that you can use in order to get back to your Warp Gates. The other, I like to hotkey them just because that's what I'm used to, but the other thing you can do is there is a Warp Gate button that's reserved specifically for Protoss to get back to it all the time. So if you want to select those, you're going to want to look up in your hotkeys to see what it is, but on grid it's set to Y, and standard is set to W. So you want to get used to that as well. So okay, we're losing pylons here, but what we can do as Protoss is that every pylon we make has a power field around it. That's what this little blue circle is. That means our warp gates can warp anything there that's available whenever we want. So if I want to make stalkers here, I can do that, and the stalkers will be built here instead of being built back at the building. It's one of the biggest differences in Protoss in comparison to the other races. And again, if I wanted to stack up commands like that, I can just hold Shift and it'll do all that for me, and I won't have to do each one individually. So we'll kill all these guys just to demonstrate how useful this is. And I can kill armies that are out on the map, and I can also reinforce right next to where my army already is instead of having to warp them in here and walk them all the way across the map, which takes a whole bunch of extra time. So get used to that as well. Let me build a couple of other buildings and show you a couple of other cool little tricks that we can use. And you wouldn't want to build this much production like this. This is pretty silly, but it's really just for the purposes of demonstrating the different ways in you can manage your production. So another cool thing that you want to do is that if you want to select all of these in addition to what you already have selected, you can hold Control and Shift at the same time and just click on one. It'll select all the robos for you. Control and Shift, it'll select all the Stargates for you, etc. So you'll get in the habit of, oh, I need to grab everything on the screen, I might as well just hit Control and Shift and click on whatever I need and add it to my control group. So that's another cool little thing. Now once these are done producing, I'm going to show you the tab function, which basically switches between different types of units that are in the same control group or in the same selection. So what I have right now is I have all my gateways and all of my robos and Stargates all mapped to the same hotkey. You can see down here, if I bring up 2, you'll see all my warp gates, you'll see all my Stargates, and you'll see all my robos. Right now if I hit 2, I'm only going to see the production for my gateways. So if I want to warp in like this, I definitely can. But what if I want to use my robos and they're already hotkeyed? What you can do is you can hit tab and it'll switch over to the next in line as far as what you have hotkeyed. So now you can see I have all the production up for my Stargates, and if I hit tab again, it'll show me all the production that I have for my robo. So if you want to put all your production on one hotkey, you can do it that way. Some people like to do that. You can also just select different hotkeys to put these on that you're comfortable with. I tend to do my robos on 3 and my Stargates on 4 just because that's what makes sense to me. But you can do it whatever way you want. And another cool thing that you can do is if you want to remove stuff from a selection, you can hold Shift and you'll maintain everything that you have, but you'll also remove what you click on down here. So if I want to remove my robos, I can do this, or I can hold Control and Shift and remove all of the same type. And then I can remap my warp gates that way. Whoops, I just unbound my robo hotkeys. So yeah, you definitely want to get used to all these little tricks because, again, the less action that you can, or rather the less effort you can put into the actions that you have to do, the better off you're going to be throughout the game. So let's see, what else is there for Protoss that we need to cover? We should probably mention the Mothership Core and the utility that they have there because this is a really important unit, especially to Heart of the Swarm. So I'll go ahead and put one of these out and we'll see what we can do, the different little tricks that we can do with the Mothership Core. You should note that the Mothership Core, you can only have one on the field, and that's a very special unit for Protoss. So you want to be careful with not losing it. You want to be careful that you have a focused reason why you're using it. We'll add a whole bunch of other buildings, and we'll again just get used to our different little hotkey locations, or rather camera save locations. Yeah, we'll have to just wait for her to be done. Again, we can demonstrate the usefulness of tab, because right now if I select my army, I only have the Mothership spells in here, but I also have other spellcasters like sentries. I can just hit tab to get to these sentries as well. Or again, I can just have them on different hotkeys. So if I hotkey my entire army to 5, but only my sentries to 6, then I can move my entire army when I select 5, but if I want to use just the sentries, I can just hit 6 and use only their spells. So you want to just get into habits that are going to help you, again, just play the game a lot faster, so that you don't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and get the army out on the map here. Let's pretend that I'm fighting a big army here that I know I just can't beat. This is one of the biggest things with Mothership that you can actually do. There's a function here called Mass Recall that will get you and all of your nearby units back to a nexus. So let's pretend that I just can't fight this army. I'm like, oh no, what do I do? What do I do? I can do this. I can center my vision on one of my bases. I can recall. It'll transport my entire army back to this base. So that's a really important function that you need to be using in the late game. The other things that the Mothership has are Time Warp, which slows down a whole bunch of different units that are inside there, only enemy units. And you can also put a giant cannon on one of your Nexi, but you definitely want to get familiar with that. As far as Protoss, I think that's about as far as we should go right now. The video that follows this in the playlist is the Protoss macro video. And I want to warn you that that video is going to be really intense. It's going to be pretty hard to keep up on just because there's just so much to process. Let me just go ahead and surrender this AI. We lost to a very easy AI. No. But yeah, so the next video is going to be really intense, and I wanted to stress that quite a bit, that this video is just to lead into that one. So if you think you got a whole bunch of these mechanics down and you want to see them in action in the Protoss macro video, then go ahead and watch that one, and we'll see you there in just a second if you're planning on doing that.